couple months back, I did a video ranking all of the Yes studio albums. That, plus a recent video by Prog Rock Jock, got me thinking. I really need to rank Rush albums too. Arguably the only band I have an even more obsessively encyclopedic knowledge of than Yes. It's a bit easier with Rush to be obsessive because their work never fell to the cringeworthy depths of Yes at their worst. But that also makes ranking the Rush albums harder. Unlike with Yes, I'm going to go in the traditional worst to best order here, but TLDR, no surprises, Moving Pictures is number one. First, time for my own personal Rush memoir. My first encounter with Rush was the concert video from their Grace Under Pressure tour. I saw it on MTV or HBO, I can't really recall which, when I was in 5th grade. I was entranced, but I only saw it once, and eventually I forgot all about it. It wasn't until that concert video was released on DVD in 2003, and specifically seeing Count Floyd from SCTV introducing The Weapon, that those first memories of the band came flooding back. My first lasting connection with Rush happened 4 years after I saw that concert video as a kid. I was a freshman in high school, and I was at a sleepover with 3 friends. One of them brought a cassette tape of A Show of Hands, the brand new live album that Rush had just released. Our host Jason and my best friend Matt ignored it and went about whatever they were already doing. But I sat transfixed with Mark, the guy who brought the tape, and listened to A Show of Hands in its entirety. It felt like an initiation rite, which may have been Mark's intent. As soon as that comical Three Stooges intro ended and the opening guitar chord of Big Money came crashing in, I knew instantly that this was like nothing I had ever heard before, and it would shape my musical life, and thus my life in general, from that moment forward. Yes came next, then Pink Floyd, King Crimson, and Genesis, followed by an ever more obscure parade of 1970s bands after we moved away to separate colleges in the early 1990s. Mark and I stayed in touch via the internet. I'm talking Telnet chats and Usenet newsgroups. This is pre-web, and we kept trying to one-up each other with every new discovery. But it all started with Rush, and they're the one band I keep coming back to. So let's take a look at all 19 Rush studio albums from worst to best, in my opinion. Number 19, Presto, 1989. As with Yes, I got into Rush just as they were hitting their creative low point. Presto was their first new studio album, released during my sophomore year of high school, after I'd spent about a year eagerly digesting everything they had released before it. I had my first job as a grocery bagger making a whopping $3.69 an hour, minimum wage at the time. Just about every penny I made went into buying cassettes, and then CDs. We got our first CD player that summer, including almost the entire Rush back catalog. To say Presto was disappointing is an understatement, so I'll just have to leave my disappointment understated. I like Show Don't Tell, but the rest of the album has made no lasting impression on me whatsoever, beyond vaguely remembering not to bother listening to it. Number 18, Roll the Bones, 1991. For the most part, I think Roll the Bones is even worse than Presto. It extends the glassy, brittle, late 80s, early 90s production value of Hold Your Fire and Presto, but adds the affront of Geddy Lee trying to rap on the title track. Fortunately, it's brief, and the song overall is not bad, although most of the rest of the album is forgettable. The one saving grace is the excellent lead-off track, Dreamline. It's probably the single best Rush song recorded after 1985. They continued to play it in concert, accompanied by an intense laser show, and it has a moment of true lyrical brilliance from drummer Neil Peart. Yes, that's the correct pronunciation, and I care enough to get it right. We are young, wandering the face of the earth, wondering what our dreams might be worth, learning that we're only immortal for a limited time. That song is so good, I almost regret placing the album this low, but the rest just doesn't live up to Dreamline's promise. Number 17, Rush, 1974. What can I say? It's the band's debut album. It's 3 teenagers trying to sound like Led Zeppelin in a high school gymnasium in suburban Canada. And there's no Neil on it. It's actually a decent album, all things considered. And John Rutsey was a really solid drummer. It's only so low on this list because everything else, well, almost everything, was so much better. Number 16, Test for Echo, 1996. First, a word of apology to this album. I know I'm not fair to it. I bought it right when it came out in 1996. I tried to like it. It just wasn't what I was hoping for, and I went almost 20 years before I gave it a second chance. That second chance was a few months ago. I listened to the album straight through and honestly was taken aback by how much better it is than I remembered. Unfortunately, it's still not all that great. The 79% of Rush's catalog I haven't already mentioned is better. Rush is a tough band to rank. Unlike most bands this prolific, they've never produced an album that's absolute trash. Number 15, Vapor Trails, 2001. This is a special album. It was released 5 years after its predecessor, Test for Echo, but the band had been through it in the interim, especially Neil. His daughter and wife had died less than a year apart. The band seemed to be over. Neil was lost. He got on his BMW motorcycle and rode it as far as he could within the confines of North America. He chronicled the experience in the memoir Ghost Rider. It's truly a phenomenal book. Buy yourself a bottle of Macallan 12 and check it out. Vapor Trails is a promising album with a renewed sense of energy and purpose. Unfortunately, the mix was awful, and even the later remix couldn't improve it that much. Well, at least it sounds better than Death Magnetic. Number 14, Hold Your Fire, 1987. Up until Neil's extended, grief-driven hiatus, Rush followed a strict, if maybe not intentional, pattern. 4 studio albums, then a live album. That approach seemed to neatly encapsulate their various eras. A show of hands, that live album that sparked my enduring interest in the band wrapped up their 80s synth era, from Signals in 1982 through Hold Your Fire in 1987. I know most of the big songs of that era more from those excellent live versions than from the often overproduced studio versions, and each of these albums was more overproduced in that stifling 80s way than the previous. Hold Your Fire found the band at their most fragile and brittle sounding, with probably the least inspired collection of songs they had put out to date. There still are several great tracks on this album, like Force 10, Mission, and Time Stand Still. The latter has some more great lyrics by Neil that mean more to me as I get older, with unexpectedly poignant guest vocals from none other than Amy Mann. Time stands still. I'm not looking back, but I want to look around me now. Time stands still. See more of the people and places that surround me now. This is a good album. It's not a great album. Number 13, 2112, 1976. This point in the video is going to have the most rewatched peak in the timeline because it's where all of you will have paused to roast me in the comments. I stand by it. I do not love this album. I don't hate it. I just don't get why it's so adored. Oh, I totally get the importance of the album. It saved the band's career, but on its own, I just don't think it warrants anywhere near the level of reverence it gets. There's some great music in the sidelong title suite, but there's a reason they almost never played the whole thing live after 1977. Admit it, can you really conjure up anything past the first 4 minutes in your head and know that attention all planets of the Solar Federation stuff at the end doesn't count? As for side 2, there's a tribute to bong rips, a tribute to 60s sci-fi TV, a sappy ballad, and a couple of even more forgettable tracks. It's just not really that great, especially given the massive leap forward the band was about to take. And do I need to talk about Ayn Rand? Never mind, she'll come up with the next one too. Number 12, Fly By Night, 1975. Honestly, I feel like I could smush Fly By Night, Caress of Steel, and 2112 together into one album. They just took the best parts of all 3, including Fountain of Lamneth instead of the 2112 suite, and turned that into one album. I'd probably love it. As for Fly By Night itself, I like it better than 2112 because it's more fun. The band is really riding high with the introduction of Neil Peart's drums and lyrics. The title track is catchy with some personal storytelling from Neil about this new adventure he's joining. And the extended track Bytor and the Snow Dog is prog-tastic without taking itself too seriously. Of course, then there's Anthem. That song, plus some of the themes on 2112, led to a longtime link in some people's eyes between Rush and Ayn Rand, and the band even got accused of being fascists. If you look at the full breadth of their work, this claim is preposterous, even if Neil was lyrically engaging with some of Ayn Rand's ideas back in the mid-70s. Well, guess what? I read a bunch of her stuff in high school and college too. Like Neil, I was a brainy misfit. In Anthem, a sparse novella that would probably take less time to read than watching this video, the message is really just about an individual in a rigidly conformist society discovering the liberation of thinking for themselves. Obviously, Anthem was a gateway drug for the more sociopathic ideas in Ayn Rand's later, insufferably epic tomes, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. But, like me, Neil stepped back from that precipice pretty quickly. And on that note, let's move on. Number 11, Snakes and Arrows, 2007. When this album was released, it was heralded as a return to form, and it kind of was. It was definitely much stronger than either Test for Echo or Vapor Trails. But was the inclusion of 3 instrumentals a sign of prog resurgence, or was it just that Neil was lyrically running out of gas? I don't really have the answer. All I can say is I did think this was a really great album when it was released in 2007, but I don't know if I've listened to it since 2008. Number 10, Clockwork Angels, 2012. Okay, are you ready for this? You better sit down. Question: what was the first concept album Rush ever recorded? Surprise, it's Clockwork Angels, their last album. It's the only concept album they ever recorded. Oh sure, they had a bunch of extended prog epics and even 3 side-long suites, but only one true, complete concept album. Honestly, like Snakes and Arrows, I loved it when it came out, but I haven't really listened to it in years. Still, the concert from that tour stays with me more than almost any in my life. Did Neil already have cancer when they recorded this album? If he did he know? Did Geddy and Alex? Regardless of the disease that took him from us, decades of bashing on the drums had taken their toll, and Neil was in constant pain on tour. Retirement was overdue. Neil cherished his privacy, and his lifelong friends Geddy and Alex respected that. So we may never know the answers to those health questions. Suffice to say, it was the end. The Garden, the final track on the final Rush album, was definitely Neil's way of saying goodbye to the fans. The treasure of a life is a measure of love and respect. The way you live, the gifts that you give. In the fullness of time, it's the only return that you expect. Number 9, Caress of Steel, 1975. Yes, it's the album that almost ended the band's career, and I like it the best of all of their early stuff. I think a lot of it is tied to personal memories. This was the 3rd Rush album I ever owned because I found it on cassette for $4 in a cutout bin. I listened to this album way more than any of their other early ones, and that's probably why I developed an attachment to it. Which is funny considering how stupid the record label was with the cassette. They tried to even out the lengths of the sides, and that led to the boneheaded decision not just to split up the side-long Fountain of Lamneth suite, but to put its weird second movement, Didaxa Narpitz, just some random words yelled over a drum solo, on its own, on side 1. But it gets better. They also swapped the novelty track, I Think I'm Going Bald, onto side 2. Not just at the beginning or at the end, but in the place of Didaxa Narpitz, in the middle. It doesn't matter. I still think The Fountain of Lamneth is way more musically and lyrically interesting than 2112, and it got even better when I finally bought the CD and got to hear it in the proper sequence. Number 8, Counterparts, 1993. By 1993, grunge was in full swing. Rush finally cast aside the digital synths and crystalline production of their previous 3 albums and got back to rock. Listening to Alex talk about that synth era, you get the feeling that he actually hates a huge chunk of the band's most commercially successful work. But he's just such a chill dude that he, rolled with it. I didn't love Counterparts when it came out. Maybe that's because in 1993, I was in college at the peak of my obsessing over 70s prog rock and rejecting current musical trends. I wanted Rush to sound the way they used to, not like Pearl Jam. But as the years went by, I realized this is actually a really good album. Definitely the best they made after their mid-80s peak. Speaking of which, number 7, Power Windows, 1985. This was the first album where Rush began to flirt with that big 80s reverb sound. I don't like it, but it's not too excessive yet. This is a very strong batch of songs, starting off with the great Big Money, which of course is the first track on A Show of Hands, the live album that started all of this for me. I like the live version better. Several great tracks from this album ended up on A Show of Hands, including Manhattan Project and Marathon. But my favorite, Middletown Dreams, was a new discovery when I finally picked this one up later in high school. I don't listen to this album a lot, mainly because these days, if I'm going to listen to Rush, there are 6 other albums I'd pick first, but it's still a good one. Before I go on, if you happen to watch my previous video ranking Yes albums, you may have noticed a different tone here. Much less snark. I'm not quite sure Rush ever reached the highest artistic summit that Yes did on Close to the Edge, but they were a hell of a lot more consistent, and not just in their personnel. Okay, next up. Number 6, Hemispheres, 1978. For me, the 6 remaining albums on this list are all such essential listening that they could be put in almost any order. In fact, I might change my mind before I finish this No. Wait. Uh, yeah, okay. Tense. I wasn't sure there for a second. I think it's safe to say that Hemispheres is Rush's most proggy album, from the peak of their late 70s prog rock era. From the sidelong epic title suite to the absolutely bonkers 9.5-minute instrumental adventure La Via Strangiato, the album is pure sonic perfection. In fact, maybe that's why I don't like it quite as much. It feels too perfect. How a band managed to record an album this precise without modern digital trickery is truly astounding. But the biggest weakness for me on this album is that title suite. It just feels a bit too repetitive. A bit too repetitive. A bit too repetitive. A bit too repetitive. It's got some great musical ideas, but they seem to come back too often, without developing into anything new. I think it makes sense given the lyrical structure. It's just not as exciting to listen to as some of their other work. Oh, and the ham-fisted allegory of the trees seemed a bit much for me, even when I was 15 and totally into that kind of thing. Number 5, A Farewell to Kings, 1977. I've talked a lot about A Show of Hands, but this was really the album that did it for me. The one that opened my ears to a whole new realm of musical creativity, fantastical storytelling, and mind-blowing instrumental virtuosity. It was the first CD I ever owned, even though I already had it on cassette. It was the album that made me pick up an electric bass. From the gnarly instrumental riffing on the 6-minute title track, I still can't figure out the time signature, to the sci-fi journey of Cygnus X1, to, of course, the greatest prog epic in the band's entire catalog, Xanadu. I absolutely love this album. Even the so-called filler tracks are great. Start to finish, I wouldn't change a note. Number 4, Grace Under Pressure, 1984. This could be a somewhat controversial pick. If you had asked me back when I was 15 where I'd place this album on a ranking of Rush albums when I'm 51, I'd say, it depends. How many are there now? But here it is at number 4. Distant Early Warning was one of my favorite tracks on A Show of Hands, and it also has the excellent Red Sector A, inspired by the perseverance of Geddy Lee's parents in the concentration camps during World War II. Beyond those tracks, I discovered many others I consider essential classics. Some, like Afterimage, don't really hit you until you've been around long enough to lose meaningful people in your life. Suddenly You Were Gone, from All the Lives You Left Your Mark Upon. Number 3, Permanent Waves, 1980. Okay, I wasn't kidding earlier. I did actually change the order as I was writing this. But does it even matter which order I put these top 3 albums in? They're all just so good and such essential soundtracks to my life. Permanent Waves was the beginning of the band's transition from prog rock to more radio-friendly pop rock, although they never got that friendly or poppy. Of course, the spirit of radio sets the tone right away and it goes down smooth, but there's still a lot to chew on with this album. From the fusion jamming of Free Will, to the dark and brooding Jacob's Ladder, to the concluding mini-epic suite Natural Science, it's possibly the most perfect blend of accessible melodies and gnarly prog the band ever achieved. Except for the album that followed it, of course, but we're not quite there yet. Before I go on, I'm truly sorry for this, but I need to bring up Ayn Rand one more time. The last and possibly most popular Rush song that gets associated with Ayn Rand is Free Will. I never saw the song as having anything to do with Ayn Rand, although I can understand why people would make that connection. To me, it's about the more fundamental philosophical concepts of free will versus determinism. Free will isn't carte blanche to act in your own self-interest without accountability. It means you choose your own actions, but you are also responsible for the consequences of those actions. But that's just my interpretation. What was the band's real intention with the song? Geddy Lee was asked that in a CBC interview.
It does have a lot to say, and a lot of good things to say about choice and about responsibility. But that's the part that some people tend to ignore, and they use the phrase free will as a license to think and do whatever they feel, no matter how hurtful it is, and without consideration of the other people that they're sharing the planet with. And that was my point, is, of course there's free will. We live in a free society. We can choose how we want to live and how we want to go about our lives, but there is a thing called social responsibility that cannot be ignored.
Number 2, Signals, 1982. How dare I put Signals above Permanent Waves? Well, I almost didn't. Again, it comes down to personal experiences. Remember when I talked about A Farewell to Kings, and even earlier when I talked about my friend Mark playing A Show of Hands for me and my job bagging groceries for $3.69 an hour? Well, A Show of Hands was a brand new double album in 1988. Even on cassette, it was like $16. I wanted to buy it, but that same cutout bin where I bought Caress of Steel for $4 had a bunch of Rush tapes. It was an easier place to start. The first two cassettes I decided to buy, at the same time, were A Farewell to Kings and Signals, and that was because there were songs from each of them on A Show of Hands. It was hard to believe the same band recorded both albums, especially only 5 years apart. Then again, when you're 15, 5 years seems a lot longer than it does to me now. I loved both albums so much, and for wildly different reasons. While A Farewell to Kings felt like a found artifact from a mystical past, Signals was a high-tech message from the future, even if it was actually 6 years old. The teen angst anthem Subdivision spoke to me at the time, of course, but I really loved Rush's attempt to sound like The Police, the reggae-influenced Digital Man. It's still my single favorite Rush track, and I couldn't believe I got to hear them play it live on the R40 tour. I'll admit, the space shuttle to ground control chatter on the closing track Countdown is a bit corny, but the band's enthusiasm for this new era in space was charming. It would be nice to be able to believe in something like that again. Well, that just leaves the surprise that I already spoiled. Number 1, Moving Pictures, 1981. How could it not be my number 1? It's the obvious choice, but it's their biggest album for a reason. It's just so good, and it's aged well. Obviously, there's Tom Sawyer, but every song is, to use a term I'm about 3 generations too old for, a banger. Red Barchetta, YYZ, or Z. Limelight, The Camera Eye, Witch Hunt, Vital Signs. I mean, I'm just listing off every track because every track deserves to be mentioned. The album is an absolute classic. Yes, the band was going for a more radio-friendly sound with this one, and I think they nailed it. But there's still the finger-twisting instrumental riff fest YYZ and the band's last great prog epic, The Camera Eye. I'm so glad I got to see them perform this album live in its entirety at the Minnesota State Fair on the 2011 Time Machine Tour. And of course, there's one of the band's most haunting tracks, one I think a lot about these days, Witch Hunt. The righteous rise with burning eyes of hatred and ill will. Madmen fed on fear and lies to beat and burn and kill. They say there are strangers who threaten us, our immigrants and infidels. They say there is strangeness too dangerous in our theaters and bookstore shelves. Those who know what's best for us must rise and save us from ourselves. Quick to judge, quick to anger, slow to understand. Ignorance and prejudice and fear walk hand in hand. Another question you could have asked me when I was 15. Which Rush song's lyrics do you think will be most relevant to the world you're living in when you're 51? I sure as hell wouldn't have guessed Witch Hunt, but it's January 2026, and here we are. That's a dark thought to end on, but I think the fact that I'm here saying it shows I'm still hopeful. As I said in my previous video, I hope for my channel to be a place where people can geek out about the same music-related topics I geek out about. And I also hope to be, and encourage others to be, a force for compassion, love, and joy in the world. I believe these 3 travelers, men of Willowdale, named Getty, Alex, and Neil, were and are just that, through the art they created and their legacy of generosity and good humor. Let's all try to be more like them. That's all for this one. You know the drill. Thanks for watching.